All right, y'all, I am back. Let's get into Hoodoo Elder Session 4, where we are doing Gullah Jack, aka Gullah Jack Pritchard, the conjure man who aimed at freedom. I'm outside, so bear with me, but I do got my notes. Okay, so Gullah Jack Pritchard was born in Machule, Morsima, possibly modern Mozambique. He was captured and taken to Zanzibar, where he was sold to Zephaniah Kingsley, a plantation owner from East Florida. Paul Pritchard, a South Carolina-based shipbuilder, subsequently purchased Jack and put him to work on the docks of Charleston. Kingsley described Jack as a priest in his own country. This is one of the most significant details in this historical record because he was not a man who discovered spiritual practice in America. He arrived carrying his own, trained and initiated, and was recognized within his own tradition before the slave trade shipped him off his name, his land, and his freedom. It could not strip him away from what he already knew. Gullah Jack became involved in Charleston's African Methodist Episcopal congregation, the same church frequented by Denmark Vesey, which is Charleston AME, for y'all who don't know. Vesey, who could read, taught the Bible there. It was in this framework that the course was established, and its invisible institution made temporarily visible a space where black community could organize, communicate, and plan beneath the surface of what white Charleston could see. This is where Vesey and Jack met. The insurrectionary Christian and the African priest, the man who had organizational infrastructure and the man who had spiritual authority. Together they would allegedly spearhead the largest slave conspiracy in North American history. In late 1821, Vesey initially approached Jack to help organize a slave revolt in Charleston. Over the course of early 1822, Jack played a number of invaluable roles in the conspiracy. Gullah Jack was key in recruiting help for the plot among the Gullah population of Charleston and the neighboring islands. He recruited among the African-born enslaved people who shared his cultural origins and recognized the tradition he carried. Many in the black community believed that he had the power to create charms that could protect the wearer against bullets. He distributed those charms to his recruits. He used his spiritual authority to terrify potential informants into silence. He was, in the language of this course, deploying hoodoo as a technology of collective resistance. By mid-1822, Gullah Jack alerted the islanders to prepare their boats and weapons for attack on Charleston. The date chosen was June 14th, a Sunday, when black people were permitted to gather at the city market with minimal supervision, and when many of the city's white elite and militia members had left town for the summer. The conspiracy was betrayed by informants before it could be executed. Vesey was captured and hanged on July 2nd, 1822. In spite of Vesey's death, Pritchard continued to gather recruits with promises that the revolt would still take place. Pritchard was captured by white authorities on July 5th and tried for conspiracy. Jack's trial quickly got underway and he was afforded no legal representation. A steady stream of slave witnesses testified to Jack's role in the conspiracy and to the fact that he had used his considerable magical powers to shape events and control participants. Jack's owner, Paul Pritchard, offered little defense of his property. Jack simply denied any role in the conspiracy and possessing any magical powers. He was convicted and sentenced to death. The testimony centered on Pritchard's magical abilities and his ability to control minds with his magic. He was hanged on July 12th, 1822. In the aftermath of the conspiracy, over 100 enslaved people were arrested and 35 of them were executed. This course has argued from its beginning, or from its first session in Hoodoo, that Hoodoo is cultural technology, knowledge compressed, encoded, and deployed for specific purpose under the condition of surveillance and constraint. Every elder in this course so far has demonstrated a different application of that technology: healing, documentation, performance, cultural preservation. But Gullah Jack demonstrates the application that this course has not yet shown, which is liberation. The charms that he distributed were not decorative. They were functional with the belief system of the people who received them, and the belief is not a separate category from strategy. An army that believes it cannot be killed by bullets fights differently than an army that is uncertain. Gullah Jack provided his recruits with spiritual invincibility. That is a military asset. The fact that it operated through Conjure rather than through Western military technology does not make it less strategic. It makes it more sophisticated because it operated on a level of the enemy could not the enemy could not counter with guns. This course introduced the concept in session 1 that courts function as an accidental archives, documenting what they feared rather than what they understood. The trial of Gullah Jack is one of the most explicit examples of principle in the entire American legal record. Because I was able to source these trial records, I was able to see in these people's own words how scared they were of hoodoo and of conjure people and of the practice itself. This course introduced the concept in session 1 that courts function as accidental archives, documenting what they feared rather than what they understood. The trial of Gullah Jack is one of the most explicit examples of principle in the entire American legal record. A steady stream of slave witnesses testified to Jack's role in the conspiracy and to the fact that he had used his considerable magical powers to shape events and control participants. The court recorded this testimony. It did not understand what it was recording. It understood only that the conjurer had organized 9,000 people towards a violent overthrow of the slave system using spiritual authority as its primary tool, and that was more terrifying than any conventional military threat. The fear is in the court record data, or the fear in the court record is data. The specificity of the testimony about charms, about spiritual invincibility, about Jack's ability to control events through his practice. This is the state's documenting, in its own distorted language, a functioning system of African spiritual technology being deployed against it. Sterling Stuckey, in Slave Culture, parses the connection between Vessey's insurrectionary Christianity and Gullah Jack's and Angolan mysticism, referring testimony elicited by the tribunal investigating the conspiracy. This is the clearest case in the course of the African retention argument made material. Gullah Jack did not learn his tradition in America. He carried it from Angola through Zanzibar, across the Middle Passage, and onto the docks of Charleston, and it arrived intact enough to organize a conspiracy involving thousands of people. The tradition did not need to be reconstructed or recovered. It was present in the body and the practice of one man who had been trained in it before slavery ever touched him. This is what the course means when it argues that hoodoo is not only a response to slavery. The root architecture was already there. Slavery forced it into new forms, but in Gullah Jack's case, the form it arrived in was already sufficient. The partnership between Denmark Vesey and Gullah Jack is analytically significant beyond what it produced. It is a structural argument about how hoodoo and black Christianity have always operated in relationship to each other, not as opposites, not as competitors, but as complementary systems addressing different dimensions of the same need. Vesey had a theology, the biblical justification for liberation, the organizational infrastructure of the AME Church, and the literal capacity to teach and persuade within the Christian framework. Jack had the tradition, the African spiritual authority, the charms, the fear his power produced in those who might betray the conspiracy, the direct connection to the African-born enslaved who might not respond to Christian arguments, but would respond to the authority of a man they recognized as a priest. Both of them were sufficient alone, but together they nearly changed history. This is the same argument that Session 1 made about Bishop Mason, that the black church and hoodoo are not separate systems, that Gullah Jack and Denmark Vesey made their argument in 1822 with their lives, putting their lives on the line. Again, for you guys who are new here, my name is Egon Similore. I am the ancestors' favorite girl, an Alabama hoodoo, not your favorite hoodoo. And I am a cultural architect, an urbanist whose work sits at the center or the intersection of culture, spirituality, and historical exploration. This is just an excerpt from my Conjure Hoodoo Elder series, which is available on my Patreon. If you would like this whole lesson or to study any of the other Hoodoo elders that we have already featured in these series, then you can find it on my Patreon, which is linked in my bio. Hope y'all enjoyed it.